Okay.
Okay, a couple of announcements. Okay, so there's no shiur next week or the week after.
It's been 11 seconds.
Thank you. L'chvod hachana lePesach and Pesach. Bezrat Hashem will pick up again in 3 weeks from now. And yes, thank you for the food. We'll do a chametz bash. You didn't know this before you showed up tonight, but the Malbim calls this the most difficult Agarata in the entire Shas. This is quite a mysterious Gemara. And
it's hard to understand.
It's hard to understand. Why is it hard to understand? We will see shortly, but the spoiler alert is that we paskin against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a Nitzchuni Banai, but that's what's interesting. Everyone knows Nitzchuni Banai, right? Nitzchuni Banai, everybody's heard of that story, right? We learned it, 27... That's the story with the Bat Kol and Rabbi Eliezer.
27 years ago?
27 daf ago. 27 pages of Gemara ago, we learned the story of Nitzchuni Banai, Rabbi Eliezer. And this is about Rabbah Bar Nahmani, and it's a similar type of story, but it's 10 times more extreme, in my opinion. But nobody knows this story, or at least I hadn't heard this story until recently. So we'll try to understand this story. We'll learn some of the halachic context because it's important to understanding the story. And then at the end, I think the Iyun Yaakov has a chidush that if I understand him correctly, he takes you like 90% of the way there, and then I want to try to fill in the last 10% if I understand him correctly. But this is a fascinating Agadata, and it's a good one to kind of learn going into Pesach to keep the fires burning before 2-week Bein HaZmanim break. So as my 9th grade Rebbe used to say, buckle your Talmudic seatbelts. Okay, there we go.
Let me go to the car and buckle me.
Okay, there you go. Sarcasm is not quite there yet. Okay, well, no, he understands sarcasm. Okay, you can come back. Okay, all right. Bava Metzia daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Kahana Ishtaili Rav Chama Bar Bar Dechasa Rabbah Bar Nahmani Agav Shma Danach Nafshe. Rabbah Bar Nahmani, right, who was Rabbah? Rabbah was the generation. He was the peer of Rav Yosef, the generation before Abai and Rava. Right, he was one of the Rashi Yeshiva. He was a gadol of the Tukufat Amoraim. So he died because of government persecution. What does that mean? Achalu bekurtza bemalka amaru ika chad gavra biyudai dekam vata tresa alfe gavra miYisrael. Yarcha bekaita v'yarcha bistava mikra gedemalka. Okay, welcome. So what happened? Someone went and told the government that Rabbah Bar Nahmani would take taxes away from the government. How so? Because 2 months of the year, 12,000 men would go to the Archa Kala. There was this kind of gathering 2 months of the year in Adar and Elul where everybody would come and learn Torah. And when that happened, they didn't pay taxes. Yeah, and so this person came and said, Rabbah Bar Nahmani is causing people not to pay taxes. Okay, Shadaru Priskita Lamalka Batre Velo Ashkache. So the government sent an officer to chase after him, and he couldn't find him. Arak Vazel Mipumpadita Laaka Meaka Laagma Meagma Lishchin Mishchin Litzrifa Mitzrifa Laena Damayim Laena Damayim Pumpadita. So Rabbah Bar Nahmani, he runs around to all these different cities. He goes from this place to that place to that place because this officer of the government is chasing after him. He ends up back where he started in Pumpadita. The Pumpadita Ashkache, and the officer found him back in Pumpadita. Why? Ikla Pristika Demalka Lahu Ushpiza de Rabbah. The two of them were staying at the same inn by chance. Okay? Krivu Taka Kame Vashku Etoikase. This is Inyan and Diom. Very good. So they brought before this officer, he's staying at an inn, so they bring him dinner, they bring him 2 cups, and they pour wine in the 2 cups for this officer. V'dalyu Taka Mikame, and they took the tray away and left the cups there. Hadar Partzufe Lachore. And then the officer's face turned around and did it 180 and faced backwards. Okay? Amarule, my navile. So the innkeeper said, what can we do? Gavra Damagu, he's an officer of the king. We can't just leave him, with his head backwards. So Amarluhu, Karivu Takelakame, Vashku Echad Kasev, Dalil Atako Mikame Velitase. So they consulted with Rabbah, who was in the inn as well. And Rabbah said, bring 1 more cup. Pour the cup, take the tray away, so that there's 3 cups in front of him, and then that'll heal him. Why? Because of this idea of zugot, right? An odd number, right? That's why we have right? So whatever. You get into Dal Kosot and the whole diyun in the Arvei Psachim about Arba Kosot, and why don't we have to worry about the even numbers with the demons? So that's the Inyan Deyomi here. But the point is, Rabbah comes and says, give a third cup, and that'll fix him. Avadu le'achi v'tasei, and it happened. The officer's face turned back around. Amar midai yadana degaver the kabaina hachahu. So the officer said, so this man who gave this advice, he must be the one that I'm looking for, right? And this is before the days of social media. Like, you didn't know just because you saw someone if it was the person you were looking for. So even if you saw Rabbah in the end, you didn't know who he was. But after this incident, he was revealed to him. So then he went after him and he found him. Almar, he said to him, Azelna meha, imiktal katlu lahu gavra la megalena, inagodim anandilim megalena. So the officer said to him, listen, I owe you my life because you fixed my head. Okay, so if the government, I won't turn you in, I'll leave. If the government says we're going to kill you unless you turn over Rabbah, so I won't reveal that you're here. But if they torture me, then I will reveal that you're here. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. I know what it means. I don't know what the significance of it is. Okay. So then somehow they got to Rava and they put him in this kind of closet and they tried to lock it, but he davened and the entrance of the closet fell down and broke. So he davened and then the gate broke. And then he ran away to a swamp. Okay, so that was all like one story. And now the second half of this is the second part of the story, which is what's going to interest us more. Okay, so Rabbah Bar Nahmani, the point we need to learn from all that is he's running on the run from the government, and he made his way to a swamp. Hava yativ agirda de dikula v'kagaris. He was sitting on the stump of a palm tree and learning Torah. Kam miflegi b'metivta derakia. Im baheret kodemet lese'ar lavan tameh. V'im se'ar lavan kodem lebaheret tahor. So they have a machloket in the yeshiva in heaven. Okay, you have a question about tzarat. So the halacha when it comes to tzarat is a baheret, right? Is like a sore. So the halacha is that if you have the sore and then the sore leads to white, your hair's turning white. If the sore comes and then the white hairs come, so it's tameh because it's because of the sore that the hairs turned white. It's assumed that it's tzarat. But if the order is reversed, v'im se'ar lavan kodem lebaheret tahor. If someone has white hairs and then the sore appears around the white hairs, so then it's considered pure. But what about safek? What if I don't know the order, right? I know that one of them appeared before the other, but I don't know which appeared before which. So do I say tameh or tahor? HaKadosh Baruch Hu omer tahor. V'chulu metifta derkiya amre tameh. Okay, so it's a machloket between Hashem and the angels. So Hashem says Tahor, and the angels say Tameh.
Hashem goes to Kula.
Hashem is Lakula. Hashem says Tahor. Yes. Okay. So how do you resolve? You have here a debate between Hashem and the angels. How do you decide who's right?
Pretty simple, no?
Why is it simple? Okay. 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 Okay.
Probably Hashem is right.
Of course, Hashem is right. Okay, well, let's keep. Yes, you are right. Hashem is right. Well, hold on. Ve'amrei man nochach. So they said, how are we going to decide? Nochach Rabbah Bar Nahmani. Let's ask Rabbah Bar Nahmani. He'll decide for us. Okay. Te'amar Rabbah Bar Nahmani. Ani yachid b'nagim. Ani yachid b'olot. Because Rabbah Bar Nahmani testified about himself. I really know the halachot of tzarat. I'm unique in that respect. So Hashem and the angels said, listen, we have this machloket, we don't know what to do, so we'll go ask Rabbah Bar Nahmani, he'll tell us what to do. Shadaru shlicha batre, so they sent in, a messenger after him. Lo ava matze malach hamavet lemikravle, but this messenger, who was the angel of that, couldn't get to him. Midela hava kapasik pumi megirsik, because Rabbah Bar Nahmani was constantly learning Torah. This should remind us of David HaMelech and
Rabbah.
And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi that we learned about a couple weeks ago. Rabbah.
Tanya. Nita. No?
That what?
Right,
So this is another reference that he was always learning. But the idea that when someone's always learning, they can't, the Malach HaMavet can't reach them. Okay, so he's sitting on this stump learning. They want to bring the Malach. Why do they want to get the Malach HaMavet? Because they need him to machriya, right, in the diyun. So what happens? Adahachi neshav zika va'avash beinei knei. So a strong wind blows and it creates a rustling in the reeds. Savar Gunda de Parashihu. So Rabbah Bar Nahmani thought it was these government officers that were chasing after him had caught up to him. So he said, Amar, Tenach nafshei dahu gavra v'layim sar bidad malchuta. So he said, I'd rather, Tenach nafshei, I'd rather, not survive than to be brought before the government, and then who knows what will happen to me. So he's now asking for that. So it's an invitation, as it were, for the Melech HaMavet. Ki hava ka necha nafshei. And then, as he was dying, Amar, what did Rabbah Bar Nahmani say? Tahor, tahor. Yatzat bat kol ve'amra, Ashrecha bar Nahmani, Shagufcha tahor, Vitzata nishmatcha b'tahor. So blessed is Rabbah Bar Nahmani that his body was pure, and when his soul left him, it was on the word tahor, because he was saying tahor as he was dying. Why was he saying tahor as he was dying? Right, it was machriya the machloket, it seems. Okay, and now just to conclude, Nefal Pitka Mirakia B'Pumpadita. So meanwhile, back in Pumpadita, which is where he was from, so a note falls from heaven. Rabbah Bar Nahmani D'Bakesh B'Shiva Shomala. Okay, so Rabbah Bar Nahmani has passed away. Nefaku Abai V'Rav V'Chul Rabbanan Liyasoke Be. So then all the rabbis, he was the Rosh Yivas, they all went to go deal with him. V'lo Avu Yadei Duchte, but they didn't know where he was. Azalu La'agma, they got to this swamp as they were searching. Chazot Sipre Demitzlale. And they found these birds that were hovering over something and providing shade. Amre, they said, Shema mina hatamus. They said, that must be where Rabbah Bar Nahmani is, or his body. Safdua tlata yomer tlata leilavata. So they mourned for him for 3 days and 3 nights. Nefal pitka, another note fell. Kol poresh yebenidu. Anyone who stops the mourning period after only 3 days should be in cherem. Safdua shiva yomes. So they continued for 7 days. Nefal pitka, a note fell again. Now you're allowed to leave.
A mysterious messenger, creeping up in the mountain, changing.
With these notes? The notes are falling from Shemayim, yeah. And then it concludes, Ahu Yoma Denach Nafshe, so the day that Rabbah Bar Nahmani passed away, Daile Zapa Udri Lahu Taya'a Kirchiv Gamla Mehai Gisa Minahar Papa Ushali Bahach Gisa. So on the day that Rabbah Bar Nahmani passed away, there was an Arab merchant who was riding on a camel, and the waves of a river, they got so big that they took him and they brought him with his camel from one side of the river to the other. So Amar, this is great, my hi, he said, what just happened? So Amrile, Nach Nafshe Rabbah Bar Nahmani, they said to him, Rabbah Bar Nahmani just passed away. So Amar Lafanav, this random Arab merchant says, Ribonot Shel Olam, Kule Alma Didachu, the whole world is yours. Rabbah Bar Nahmani Didach, and Rabbah Bar Nahmani is yours. Ad the Rabbah v'Rabbah Didach. You are his and he is yours. Amayka mecharvat le'alma. Why are you destroying the world? Nach Zappa. And the river calmed. The waters calmed down. Okay? So those are the Agadatot about the death of Rabbah Bar Nahmani. Okay. So what is, there's, we could spend several weeks, I think, on all of these different sections, but what we want to focus on is on the Machloket and the Metifta Durakia about this question of Negaim. So first of all, we need to do a bit of a tangent to get a bit of halachic background, okay? So if you look in the Mishnah Negaim on Parak Daled, it's where this Machloket actually appears, but in the names of Tanaim. Okay, so it says as follows, Baheret kachatzi gris ve'en ba klum. So let's say you have a sore that appears. The minimum size for tzarat is a gris, okay, for it to be metameh. So you have a sore that appears that's half of the volume. Ve'en baklum, it has no hairs. Nolda baheret kechatzi gris uvashte sarot. And then attached to the sore of half a gris, another half of a gris appears, and it includes 2 white hairs. So you remember what we said, if you have a sore and then 2 white hairs appear, so that's considered metameh. But in this case, is it mitzaref or lo? So the Mishnah says, this actually is mitzaref. If I have a sore that comes before the se'ar lavan, it's tameh. And since I had half of the sore, so now I have the second half of the sore appearing with the hairs, but the sore as a whole began before the hairs. Therefore, I'm mitameh in this case. V'im se'ar lavan kadam lebeheret tahor. V'im safek, what does the Mishnah say? Tameh. Rabbi Yehuda keha. Rabbi Yeshua, excuse me. Thank you. Rabbi Yeshua keha. So the Tana Kama says this case is tameh, which is like who? The angels. And Rabbi Yeshua keha. We don't know what keha means yet. Okay, we'll look into that in a minute. This Mishnah is quoted 5 different times in Shas. Our Gemara in Bava Metzia, and then also in 4 other instances. And we're going to look at some of them to understand. So in Ketubot Ayin Hey Amud Bet and Nida Yud Tet Amud Aleph, it has the same quotation of this Mishnah. It says, Im Baheret Kadam Le'Se'ar Lavan Tameh. Im Se'ar Lavan Kadam Le'Beheret Tahor. Safek Tameh. Rabbi Yehuda, Yoshua Omer Keha. And now, my Keha, what does Keha mean? Amar Rabbah Keha Tahor. Okay, so who says what Rabbi Yoshua means here? It's Rabbah. And he describes this word Keha to mean Tahor. Now, why does that make sense?
Because he already said Tahor.
He's the one who said, right, Rabbah is the one who said Tahor. So Rabbah then, if we're understanding this simply, he's passing like Rabbi Yoshua in his own explanation of what Rabbi Yoshua meant, right? And that's Rabbah's explanation there. Right, we need to understand, of course, normally when you have Da'at Yachid and Tanakama, the halacha Tanakama. And indeed, we'll see shortly that is the halacha, okay? But before that, I want to look at this in Nazir and Daf Samech Amud Bet. It also brings this Mishnah, but with a bit more context. And it's important for our Chidush later on, or the Yun Yaakov's Chidush. Okay, the Mishnah in Nazir says as follows. Kol sfek negaim batchila, tahor ad shelo niskak l'tuma. Right, if it isn't clear, there's a lot. The halachot of negaim are very, very complex and detailed and nuanced. So the Mishnayot and negaim, they go through all these edge cases. And this Mishnah Nazir has a general principle. It says, whenever I don't really know what the case is or what happened, so a person starts with the assumption of a status of tahara, right? If I have no reason to think that they're tameh, that's their default. That's the chazaka. But once somebody has some kind of zikuk to tuma, some reason for me to think they might be tameh, so then the suffix is tameh because it's suffix the right al-khumra when it comes to tzarat. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, how do I know this? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Amar kra letaharo o letamo. Ohilu patach bo katuv b'tahara tchila. It says letaharo o letamo, so I assume tahara because that comes first. Then the Gemara asks, if that were so then I should say even after someone has some chashash for tumah, that also I assume a safek is still pure. Ela ki itmar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, aha itmar. Im baheret kadma l'se'ar lavan tameh, im se'ar lavan kodem l'beheret tahor. Safek tameh. Rabbi Shua Amar Keha. My Keha. Amar Rav Yehuda Keha v'tahor. So here, instead of Rabbah saying Keha means tahor, it's Rav Yehuda, who's another Amora.
Yes, every time he says something else, he started with Keha, with Kuf.
Yeah.
Which means like, כאילו זה יותר משתמשים בזווית כהה, כאילו it's wide.
also כף?
סוג של.
לא, זווית כהה זה גם עם כף.
מה זה?
זווית כהה?
לא, זה עם קוף. וכהה...
קרובים לפסח.
אף אחד שיניו.
בדיוק.
לא.
כאילו זה לתת לו אגרוף לפרצוף בגדול.
לא, אבל מה זה הקהה את שיניו?
זה לשנות גם את הזווית.
לשנות זווית, בדיוק. כהה זה צבע.
נכון, בכף. ואז פה הם רושמים לך כהה.
So, very good. So, the Achronim, in the Kahati, I thought to bring it, and then I didn't. In the Kahati, he goes through, there's a lot of different interpretations of what is Kah. With the Kuf, with the Kaf, does it mean different things? The same thing, the Achronim talk about it. But you're right to notice that it's a difference. The Keha with the Kaf is straightforward. It's like the color of the... Yeah. Right? He says it's kind of dull and then... or darkens. And then that's what it means is that it's tahor if that happens, because the sore kind of changes color. But yes, you're right that with the kuf it's a different girsa, and the Achronim say there's significance to that. Okay, so good. So if we go back to the Gemara, so Rav Yehuda says kiha v'tahor, v'dilma kiha v'tameh. But how do I know that kiha means tahor? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Amar kal tahor ol tamo hoil patach bo katuv b'tahara tchila. Okay, fine. So what we have here is this principle that this Mishnah is brought to help support the idea that if I don't know anything and there's no reason to assume, if I have a kind of a blank slate of a person and I have a safek, I go after tahara. But if I have some chashash for tumah, then I'm machmir when it comes to nigaim. And in this case, where I don't know which one came first, so we see that it's machloket between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yoshua. Okay. Let's actually skip the next source because it's a bit detailed halachically. I don't think we need to get into it. And look at the Mishnah Torah. So the Mishnah Torah, this is Rambam, right? Obviously, the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't bring this la halacha because the Shulchan Aruch is only halacha l'maisa, and tzarad is not halacha l'maisa. But the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, he codified everything, right? Even things that aren't practical today. So in Hilchot Tumat Tzarad, what does the Rambam say? It Safek se'ar lavan kadam, safek baheret kadma. So if I don't know which came first, the white hair or the sore, harei zot tameh. This is tameh. V'yar'eli shetumato b'safek. And the Rambam says, it seems to me that this tumah, it's not 100% clear. So who does the Rambam seem to paskin like? Like the Tanakama. And therefore like who? And therefore against who? And?
It'd be grudgingly. Like that.
And Rabbah, right? So if we follow the chain... Well,
which means that you don't burn things like truma and things like that. You don't hold it. It's tuma deoraita.
Let's talk about tzarat. What do you mean?
Yeah, if he says elisha tumato b'safek. When tuma is b'safek, so you don't burn kachim over that tuma.
Right.
So
That's true.
He's like in the middle ground, kind of.
And he needs to wait for somebody to say he's Tahor, no? He can just
What?
decide.
What middle ground? What middle ground? Akadosh Baruch Hu Amar Tahor. What middle ground? What's the question here? Right? What's the shaila? What's the shaila? Hashem said it's Tahor. Right? I mean, I'm not attacking. I'm saying, I understand what you're saying, and the question we should be asking on the Rambam is, you have a machloket in the Mishnah and the Gayim, and then you have a parallel story in our Gemara in Bava Metzia, and Rabbah is machriya like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's Tahor. You have this Mesifta Dirikiya, you don't know who that is. So, okay, the Tanakama said that it was Tameh, and usually we follow the Tanakama against the Dat Yachid, but you have this source in Bava. Why are we saying Tumato B'Safek, right?
Tanakama didn't know the story with the angels and God.
What's the question?
Of course he did. What?
What's the question?
The question is, like, if somebody has a sore, there's Ilchot Tzarat, right? That Tzarat is a type of disease that someone gets for saying Lashon Hara. So there's a question about if the disease appears in a certain way, is it considered Tzarat or not? So they're debating the question there. If you look at the Kesef, the Mishnah...
So why is there Tameh and Tahor, like a fight?
So the question is, if I don't know if the sore came first or the hairs came first. Basically, the halacha is you need the sore to happen and then the hairs to turn white for it to be tameh. If I don't know which one came first, sometimes when it comes to halacha, so if I don't know what happened, it's hard for me to know if something is kasher or not kasher, tameh or tahor, because I don't know. So I have to figure out and make the best decision based on the information I know. So that's what they're discussing here. Right? Okay, good question. So the Kesef Mishnah in his commentary on the Rambam, he says as follows. V'chetana kama. Okay, so he says the Rambam here is passing like the Tanakama. Wonderful, that's great. Ve'af agav de beperek ha'po'alim amrinan de kutcha brichu amar tahor lo b'shamayim hi. So that's great that Hashem said tahor. But what do I care? The Tanakama said that it's tameh. And lo b'shamayim hi. Ve'af agav de amrinan ma nochach Rabbah Bar Nahmani. So why is this? So remember I introduced this by saying, to me, this dwarfs Bava Metzia Nun Tera Amud Bet. This dwarfs Nitzchuni Banai. Why? Because here it's not just I'm saying against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but Rabbah, who was the Gadol Hador, was machriya like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm also passing against Rabbah in this case, right? So what does the Kesef Mishnah say? V'afagav damrinan ma nochach Rabbah Bar Nahmani v'yu amar tahor v'yatzta nishmato b'tahara yesh lomar dekevan de b'shat yitziat nishama. So since that statement happened as Rabbah Bar Nahmani was dying, hu da'amar hachi have bichlal lo b'shamayim hi. So he's already 1 foot out the door. So it's all together lo b'shamayim hi also for Rabbah.
That's the same Rabbi Yoshua from the famous story with Rabban Gamliel.
Good. And what's interesting about that?
He's also that Yechid all the time.
Rabbi Yoshua.
Rabban Gamliel told him you have to go on Yom Kippur.
And what's funny about yes, and what
basically said it's like
one hold of Yom Sak. No, that's what he said to him.
that's what Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yoshua.
yeah.
But what's Rabbi Yoshua is the one who says lo b'shamayim in Tanur Shachna, right? Why is that?
Exactly
Why is that interesting here? Why is that? Why is that ironic?
Because now we basically
because
said,
now because Rabbi Yoshua in this case is the one who says tahor, which is like Hashem and Rabbah Bar Nahmani, and now we're saying lo b'shamayim again to go against him. You understand? In other words, in Bava Metzia, in Tanur Shachnai, he invokes lo b'shamayim to say Rabbi Eliezer, it's not tahor, it's tameh, the Tanur Shachnai. Now he's saying tahor, and we're using lo b'shamayim to go against him.
Why is he flip-flopping?
He's not flip-flopping. It's just the Kesef Mishnah is using lo b'shamayim to say why we don't paskin like Rabbi Yoshua in this case. even though Hashem, the Bat Kol agreed with Rabbi Eliezer against Rabbi Yoshua in Tanur Shalachnai.
So we need to remember
Lo
just-
b'shamayim. Here, the Bat Kol agrees with Rabbi Yoshua. Lo b'shamayim, so we reject Rabbi Yoshua.
Okay.
So it's interesting. He's on the other side in this case, in this example. Is that what you were saying? Or you're saying something else?
No,
About
I just
yeah.
I thought about the story, so I said, okay, he's a Da'at Yechid again, as usual.
Oh, yeah. This guy, he's always that Yachid, Rabbi Yoshua. Yeah.
Always the opposite.
And even when Hashem is like him, he still doesn't get the psak. Right, okay. Even though he's that Yachid. Yeah. Okay, so you see how the Kesef Mishnah tries to, he's backed into a corner, the Kesef Mishnah. Because like I said before, it's not just that Hashem, Mela Hashem says, Lo b'shamayim be fine. But also Rabbah himself says it. And you have to say, oh, he was also nach nafshei, so he's also Lo b'shamayim. Ve'eno kedai lo'tzi miklal shebiyadenu de'alacha ketana kama. And if I look back at the Mishnah, so the halacha falls Tana Kama, that's the rule. Ve'ot shebitchila perakei dinagaim stan lan tana hachi. Okay, and also, this is the thing I skipped, also, in the beginning of Perek Hey, it just kind of states this without a machloket, so that's the assumption that it's halacha, that it's tameh. Okay? So we see here the Rambam paskening, he says tumato b'safek, like you said, Yonah, but still, he says harezo tameh. In other words, if I have to decide, it's a situation of tumah, which is like the Tanakama in the Mishnah, which follows the general rules of halacha ketanakama, but with this huge caveat of both HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Rabbah Bar Nahmani saying Tahor and us ruling against them. Okay? So what are we supposed to... I mean, thankfully we don't have to do anything with it because this is all tzarat. But in theory, what are we supposed to do about this? So if I think the Yun Yaakov is making a really sharp chidush here, if I understand him correctly. You guys tell me if you agree with the way I'm reading him. Because like I said, he says like 90% of it, and I think I understand. Let's see the Yun Yaakov. Okay, so he says on the right side, Amar Tahor Tahor, on the third line on the right side. Okay, so he says we didn't ask a question here. Why does he say Tahor twice? Right? If he's paskening the Shaila, he should just say Tahor, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Tahor, and the Metifta Derakiya said Tameh. So it comes Rabbah Kinach Nafshe Amar Tahor, but he says it twice. Why? Hada Amar Kefel Tevat Tahor. And this, I like this a lot. I'm curious what this meant. He says, Shamati b'shem gadol. So, does that mean he doesn't remember who said this next idea? Or is that his way of saying that this is my chiddush, but I don't know what that means. But Shamati b'shem, what?
It's his. It's a bit much to say it that way.
Shamati b'shem gadol?
Ego.
Or the opposite. Or he's like, he has this chiddush and he's saying, I heard it from someone else. It's not my idea. I don't know. Anyway, it could go either way.
You still have to refer to him as a god.
That's what I'm saying. It's
He's referring to himself.
You don't want to admit to saying yourself. It's like, I once heard this genius.
Yeah, fair enough.
I heard I'm a genius guy.
It's like,
I heard.
It's unbelievable.
You could just say I heard.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay, fair enough.
Anyway.
I'm not sure. Does he say this a lot? From the Yun Yaakov, I think he's my favorite parshan from all the Yun Yaakov that we've learned. I don't remember ever reading him say that in the few years that we've been learning this. Okay. But I don't know. Doesn't ring a bell. Okay, Shamati b'shem gadol, lirmoz el ma she'amru Tosfot b'Sanhedrin perek elu eina nechnakim, gabe bein nega lenega. Okay, so the pasuk when it comes to tzarad, it says, right, this is the Torah, the Mitzvah, no, bein nega lenega. How you're supposed to differentiate between different types. Okay, the achiluku misheniskak letumah az ma'amidin safek lechizkat tumah. So what does it mean that you have bein nega lenega? That the drasha over there is basically what we brought in Nazir in the Mishnah. That what the Gemara learns from there is that if you have a case where someone is niskak letumah, there's an assumption of tumah for some reason, or chashash, so then you go for tumah. Aval mishelon niskak letumah, but if you have reason to think someone is tameh, azay safek b'chizkat tara, then you start. The starting position is that a person is tahor and does not have tzarat. Okay. V'chein katav Rabbi Shimon Hazaken b'Masechet Negaim. Rash b'Masechet Negaim in his commentary on Negaim. Okay. V'uva b'Shem. Okay. D'mayri shayabo b'tchila kechatzi gris baheret. So saying, what does it mean to be niskak l'tumah? What does that even mean? So the example is, this is why we brought the Mishnah in Negaim. Remember, if you have a case, for example, where you have half a sore, and then a second half of the sore appears with the hairs. So the halacha there, according to everybody, was that was tameh. If I know the order of the appearance, I know half a grease, and then I know another half a grease with the white hairs, that's tameh. You could say to me, why is that tameh? The baheret and the hairs, in terms of the minimum shiur of the baheret being a full grease, those appear simultaneously. So why is it tameh? Because you're niskak l'tumah, because you already have the half of the sore. So that half a sore in and of itself is not enough of the shiur to make you tameh, but you're niskak l'tumah. So that's what it means to be niskak l'tumah. I already have a sore, so I'm not like a person with nothing. I'm a person that has something, so therefore I go safek l'chumra when it comes to tzara. So that's the example that he brings. Okay, so what does all this have to do with Rabbah Bar Nahmani? Okay. שהיה לו בתחילה כחצי גריס בהרת, לכן מעמיד מחזקת טומאה. ואם כן, יפה אמר רבא טהור טהור. This is why Rabbah said טהור twice. Why did Rabbah say טהור twice? אם מתחילה בחזקת טהרה, הוא טהור. מה שאין כן, אם היא בחזקת טמא, טמא. Basically, when Rabbah says טהור טהור, he's, the Yun Yaakov says he's not paskening that this is tahor. He is saying, you guys in Shemaim, you don't know what the din is if it's a safek. So look at the Mishnah Nazir and Daf Samach Hamad Bet. Kol sfek negaim b'tchilat tahor what shel niskak l'tumah mishkak l'tumah sfekot tameh. And the language of Tosfot and the Gemara there in the Einlein Chnakim is tahor tameh tameh. In other words, if someone has a cheskat tahara, you go tahor. If someone has a cheskat tumah, like in the case of the chatzi gris, you go tameh. So the formulation tahor tameh tameh is a principle in the Gaim. They say you follow the chazaka. What?
Status quo. As long as you don't need.
You follow the status quo.
Any reason to change it?
Right.
You don't change it.
So what is the Yun Yaakov doing then? Because if you go back to our Mishnah said, what's the case that Rabbah Bar that HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the angels are arguing about is brought of, I don't know the order, right? I don't know which happened first. But it doesn't bring the beginning of the full of the case, which is only in the Mishnah. If we go to the Mishnah in the Gaim, beginning is a very specific example of a baher chatzi gris ve'en baklum. First half a sore appears, and then nodava baher chatzi gris b'shtei sarot. So then I say tameh because niskak l'tumah. But if I don't know the order, but I still know that this is the case that I'm dealing with of the chatzi gris.
What day did this happen on?
What?
What day did this story happen on? It's a weird story.
It happened 1,700 years ago.
But what day?
Plus minus, yeah. I don't know which day. Good question. So when Rabbah Bar Nahmani says, Tahor, Tameh, Tameh, in this case of a safek, where I'm dealing with a Baher Chatzi Gris, what's he actually pasking? He says, oh, Hashem and the angels, you guys are confused, but you guys forgot that this Mishnah, that you follow the Chazaka. And what's the Chazaka in this case? The Chazaka is Tameh, because you have the Chatzi Gris. So if the Chazaka is Tameh, then he's actually paskening. When he says Tahor, if instead of saying this case is Tahor, he's saying Tahor as always follow the Chazaka, and that's his way of saying that, then he's really paskening not Tahor, he's paskening Tameh. Because the Chazaka in this case is Tameh. Okay? The Yun Yaakov continues and says, oh boy, okay, very small letters. V'zeh she'amar, Ashreich Rabbah Bar Nahmani, sheyatzah nishmatcha b'tahara. Now it explains the bat kol. Because when the bat kol comes and says, Ashreich Rabbah Bar Nahmani, that your soul left you with the word tahara. So what did we think that meant? We thought that meant the bat kol is like, I told you, angels. I told you that the halacha was like me, right? That it's tahor, like I said. Because look, Rabbah Bar Nahmani agreed with me. But according to Yaakov, when he says tahor, he means tameh. But why did he say tahor? Ashrecha sheyatzah, he didn't want to die with the words tameh on his lips. So he has to invoke this principle of follow the chazaka. He can either say tameh or tahor. The principle is the same either way. But instead of wanting to say tameh, because he was dying, he didn't want to die with the word tameh, so he said tahor to mean tameh. So Ashrecha Bar Nahmani, even though you're paskening against me, sheyatzah nishmatcha b'tahor, because you wanted to make sure that when you pasken, that the word that was on your lips when your soul left, like with Rabbi Akiva, with the word echad, right, when he was being tortured by the Romans, that the word that left would leave your lips would be tahor. even though what you're really saying in your psak is follow the chazaka, which in this example that you're arguing about is not tahor but tameh.
But then why invoke the Rabbah Shemayim? He saying that his opinion is irrelevant because he's already practically dead.
So the Yun Yaakov has a different parish than the Kesef Mishnah. That was the Kesef Mishnah who invokes Rabbah Shemayim. That's not in the Gemara. So the Kesef Mishnah doesn't have this whole explanation. The Kesef Mishnah understands it the tradition, the pshat, like the pshat, the simple way to understand, which is when he says Tahor, he's paskening like Hashem. But the Yun Yaakov says, I avoid the whole issue. I don't need the Kesef Mishnah here. Because Rabbah is actually saying Tameh, in which case he's paskening like the Mesifta Dirakia, and he's paskening like the Tanakama, and the Rambam is paskening like all of them. And the only problem I have is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Tahor. But okay, Lo B'Shamayim with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a problem. We have precedent already from Tanur Shalachnai to go against Hashem. Rabbah Bar Nahmani is paskening like Rabbi Yoshua did, Lo B'Shamayim, and in this case, he's actually paskening against Rabbi Yoshua instead of like him. So just to finish off the Yun Yaakov, Tameh Yesh Rambam. Oh, and then he says, and that explains the Rambam. In other words, that the Rambam, when the Rambam says Tameh, why does he say Tameh? Doesn't Hashem say Tahor? Doesn't Rabbah Bar Nahmani say Tahor? So he says no, because if Rabbah Bar Nahmani was really saying Tameh, and he said Tahor, because he didn't want to die with the word Tahor on his lips, with the word Tameh on his lips, so he's really paskening like the Tanakama and paskening like the Mesifta Derakia, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Tahor, but we're Lo B'Shamayim in this case. Okay, so the Yaakov totally switches, like he literally reverses the way we understand the sugya. I want to add one final thought to this. There's this concept, the Gemara Pesachim Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, it says as follows, Amar Bishua ben Levi, לעולם אל יוציא אדם דבר מגונה מפיו, אשר יקיים הכתוב 8 אותיות, ולא יוציא דבר מגונה מפיו, שנאמר מן הבהמה הטהורה, ומן הבהמה אשר איננה טהורה. That when Noach is commanded to bring animals onto the ark, so bring the tahor animals and bring the animals that are not tahor. So why not just say bring the tahor animals and the tameh animals? So Bishua ben Levi learns from that a person should always be careful not to say davar maguneh, right? Something impure. The Torah, which doesn't waste even a letter, spent 8 extra letters saying be'ema asher einena Torah instead of saying a be'ema tmeah. That the Torah wasted 8 letters to teach you not to say something impure. You know, everybody asks, but the Torah says tameh all the time, so how do you understand that? But the Rabbi Shub ben Levi's teaching here is that a person is allowed to expend extra words in order to avoid saying tameh and say enena Torah. So I would argue, if we take the Yun Yaakov, so when Rabbah says tahor, he's saying instead of tameh, or instead of tameh. And so he's fulfilling this principle of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. In other words, it's not even 8 otiyot, he's using less, but he's making sure the same principle, he's saying it in a positive language instead of a negative language, because he doesn't want to be Adam, sheyotzeh davar meguneh mipiv, and that's why the Bat Kol praises him and says, shetztan nishmatcha b'tahor. One other idea that I wanted to suggest is that there is one small problem with this idea of the Yun Yaakov, and that is that if you remember when we went back and we said Rabbi Yoshua Omer Keha, right? We said, is it with Kuf or the Chaf? What does it mean? So we saw in Ketubot Nida that Rabbah said it means Tahor. And I kind of misled us by saying, oh, so look, Rabbah's being consistent because he said Tahor, and now he's explaining Rabbi Yoshua to mean Tahor, so because he's paskening like him. But according to Yun Yaakov, so why is Rabbah explaining Rabbi Yoshua's opinion to mean Tahor, if Rabbah is really saying Tameh? So one way, there's one answer is, he's explaining Rabbi Yoshua, he just doesn't agree with him. He agrees with the Tanakama, but he's explaining what Rabbi Yoshua means. But another possibility is that we actually brought that this Mishnah appears 5 times in Shas. One of them is the actual case in Bava Metzia. Then it also appears in other examples, right? So it appears also in the Mishnah and the Gaim, where there's no explanation of what Keha means. It appears in Ketubot and Nida, where Rabbah explains it to mean Tahor. Then it also appears in Nazir, where Rav Yehuda explains it to mean Tahor. And in truth, it also appears in Sanhedrin Pei Zayin Amud Bet, which says as follows, Nig'ei Adam, uplugta Rabbi Yeshua v'Rabbanan. When it comes to Sarat, it's an argument between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbanan. Ditnan, it's taught in the Mishnah, Im Beheret Kadam L'Sar Lavan Tameh, Im Sar Lavan Kadam L'Beheret Tahor. Safek, right, this is our Mishnah. Tameh, it's impure. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Keha, Mai Keha, Amar Rava Keha Tahor. Rava says Keha Tahor. So if you look here, I brought the Mesorat HaShas, or I tried to bring the Mesorat HaShas, where the Mesorat HaShas basically says, In two places it says Rabbah. Okay? Those are the cases in Ketubot Nida. In one place it's Rav Yehuda who explains it. That's in Nazir. And in one place it's Rava in Sanhedrin. So the Masoret HaShas says, correct the case that says Rava to mean Rabbah. Here in Sanhedrin. It's a Taut Sofer. The Girsa should be Rabbah, like in these, because I have two in Ketubot Nida that say Rabbah. In Sanhedrin it says Rava. And Nazir it's Rav Yehuda, that's somebody else. So maybe we could say, what? Yesh Meirab.
Instead of Rabbah.
No, I got it. It's good. Yeah. Very good. So I said, according to the Yun Yaakov, how do we understand the fact that Rabbah explains Rabbi Yoshua to mean Tahor, even if he himself is passing Taneh? And we said, okay, maybe he's just explaining what he meant, but he passing like Tanakama. Or I can take the Masoret HaShas, who says, when it says Rava in Sanhedrin, it's a Taut Sofer. It should say Rabbah, because there's two cases like Rabbah, and say the opposite. Even though now I'm going by the minority, I could say, when it says Amar Rava Kehat Tahor, Rava is explaining Tahor. In Ketubot and Nida, I'll say Rava also said Tahor. And then Rabbah isn't commenting on what Rabbi Yoshua means when he says Keha. And then that issue isn't really so much of an issue in terms of why would Rabbah explain the opinion that he disagrees with, according to the Yun Yaakov.
Done.
Ready for the Seder.
Done.